Steve.
Thank you. Biography sheet. I have it here with my little notes. I am Steve Ajalat. Good morning, everyone. I am a probate and trust attorney. I am a partner in my own firm, Ajalat & Ajalat LLP. Our office is located over in NoHo in the Academy of Television and Arts and Sciences building. I have been an attorney for 21 years. I've been married for 21 years to my lovely wife, Gloria. I have 2 children, Andrew, 20 years old, and Lauren, 16 years old. Animals, we have 2 dogs, a bearded dragon, a gecko, dwarf hamsters, fish, and any other animals that my son happens to bring into the home from time to time. Hobbies, no real traditional hobbies. I do like to play poker. I love sports. I love football. I love basketball. I love mixed martial arts. Activities of interest, I love Vegas. My wife and I travel to Vegas at least 3 times a year, and I just love the whole entertainment vibe of Vegas. I live up Laurel Canyon in Valley Village, where I've lived for 20 years. My burning desire is to go back to Vegas. Something no one knows about me. I'm going to give you 2 things, one professional, one personal. Professional, I handled a case some years ago entitled Lejo versus the City of Alhambra. This case went up on appeal and became a seminal case actually in establishing the law in California in the area of the duties and liabilities of a law enforcement department in child abuse investigations. If you Google it, it'll come up, you'll find it. I'll tell you more about it anytime you want to know more. Personally, I have mild Tourette's. You might notice that I twitch frequently. It's something I've lived with my whole life. It's never stopped me from doing anything I've needed to do. I mention it because we had a visitor one day ask me about it. I thought it was worth mentioning. My key to success is work hard and give personalized service. In my law firm, you talk to your attorney. You don't talk to just an assistant, a secretary, or a paralegal. On to the presentation. And I was told my 10 minutes started with my presentation. Because I have a lot to say. And I'm going to talk fast.
Right here.
All right. I saw you holding that thing there. You got me all nervous. All right. I mentioned I am a partner of Ajalat & Ajalat. My firm is a father and 3 sons. And you know, I get one of 2 reactions when you tell people this. Like, wow, that's great. How special you work with your family. The other is, how in the world do you work with your family? And I think probably comes from people's own experiences. But I didn't always plan to be an attorney. I started in the direction of psychology, actually, to get a PhD and become a psychologist. Had some twists and turns along the way. Ended up a lawyer. So here I am today. Probate and trust attorney. 40 to 60% of my practice is probate and trust work, and is actually my favorite part of the practice. I'm going to give you a general overview of some probate and trust things, although it's such a broad-based thing, there's only so much I can say, but anything in the probate and trust realm revolves around death and dying. Bottom line, somebody died, somebody is about to die, or somebody is planning on dying, and they're planning for their death. There are usually a few objectives, 3 main objectives. One is somebody wants to plan for the distribution of their assets when they die, to their heirs, to their beneficiaries. Another is paying off their debts, medical bills, credit cards, whatever debts a person might leave behind. And lastly, usually you're dealing with taxes, whether it's a person's last income taxes or planning to maximize their tax benefits that they might have in relationship to their estate taxes. Anyone who dies with more than $5 million in assets is going to be subject to estate taxes. So there are a lot of planning devices to protect and maximize your taxes in that realm. As far as probate goes, now probate is a court-supervised proceeding. Usually it means a person died without a will, or they might have had only a will. Sometimes if someone had a trust, which usually avoids probate, the trust might be defective, it's ambiguous, or assets didn't get into the trust and they still get stuck with a probate. Sometimes people will elect to do a probate even when they don't have to have it, just because there are certain advantages to going through a probate proceeding. There are full probate proceedings, which usually can last at least a year to 2 years throughout the whole administration process. And then there are also summary procedures. Spouses sometimes can do a more expedited procedure. Also, if your estate is under a certain value, there are certain expedited petitions that can be filed without going through a full probate proceeding. What I do in the probate realm is I deal with administrations of probates, and I also deal with disputes and contests. So there could be a will contest, there could be a dispute over who the heirs really are, there could be a dispute over what property is really part of a person's estate. We get involved in these, and those things turn into litigation matters oftentimes. In the trust realm, what you really have is an estate planning device. The goal usually of a trust is to avoid probate, and what happens is a person will transfer all their assets into this trust, and it's like its own little company, its own little estate, and it gets administered as if it's its own entity. As I said, it avoids probate, and there are tax advantages to a trust that you don't get with a normal probate. As I mentioned before, someone with over more than $5 million estate can get certain tax advantages and deductions, marital deductions, and things that you can establish within a trust. The other thing that's good about a trust is it's usually more structured in terms of its setup. You can stagger, for instance, distributions. You want your child who's a minor now to only get distribution when they turn 18, and then maybe when they're 25 and 31. You can do that with a trust. You can provide for their education, you can provide for their medical needs, things that you can't normally do without a trust. Probate usually just distributes everything outright. Although a trust usually avoids probate, people who have trusts often end up in court anyways for various reasons, because of a defective trust or a dispute that arises. Trustee is not doing their job, somebody complains and files a petition, and they end up in court all the time. And we handle those matters as well. What I want to do, I'm going to tell you some case stories to give you a little bit of a flavor of some of the things that I do handle and some of the things that I do. Start with my very first probate, the Tobe estate. This probate lasted 7 years, longest probate I ever handled. Why? The decedent owned a partnership interest in a development that was developing property up north. It was an interesting case because the other partners were Jack Haley, who was in the Wizard of Oz, and all these other Hollywood. We have Dorothy here today. There were all these other Hollywood type people who were also partners in that, which made it pretty interesting. But this guy, he died, and he wanted to be a Hollywood type too, although he really wasn't. He died, and when we walked into his home, his house was set up like a museum. Artwork, collections, collectibles everywhere. We had to bring in a professional appraiser to find out what these things are worth. We found out everything in the home was fake. Everything was a knockoff. It was worth nothing. This guy actually, his whole life was a fake. He held himself out as being married when he really wasn't. We had a wife who was supposedly living in Thailand. We had to investigate, was this really his wife or not? Actually, it turned out he really did marry her, but he did not maintain a relationship with her as if she was his wife. We found all these pictures of him with a young child who we thought might be his son. Nobody knew who this kid was. They didn't know his name, and we investigated this, and it turned out it wasn't his son at all. So we had to go through this to figure out who this guy's heirs were because he left no will. Another matter, the Brodetsky Trust. This was 3 siblings, 2 sisters and a brother, all fighting over their parents' trust assets. The parents' trust was in bad shape. It was poorly written, so it wasn't clear who was to get what. But these working class parents accumulated millions of dollars over their lifetime, had savings and bonds and cash and stocks, and this all had to be distributed. The interesting thing that happened in this case was the brother, who the sisters were very scared of. I was always told this brother is scary. He carries a gun. You don't want to be around him. He's unstable. At some point, I lost contact with one of my clients, who was one of the sisters, and I was worried. I usually talk to her every week. For several weeks, I didn't talk to her. I opened the paper one day and read this article about a woman who had been murdered in her home, and and they said in North Hollywood, and they gave the street name, and I thought, okay, this doesn't sound good. I immediately called the police department. I said, I think I know who this might be. They confirmed that it was in fact my client. Now, of course, that was pretty startling news, but the other thing I had to get on top of was my client always came into my office with this metal box that had $400,000 to $500,000 in U.S. saving bonds in it. And I knew that box was in her house. I had to go get it. We were scared that the brother might try and break in and get these bonds. Well, we all met over at the house with their attorneys, and we got into the house. As it turns out, she was a complete hoarder. I had no idea. The house was packed up to shoulder height with debris. We had to walk through trails in the house, and I had to find this metal box. Luckily enough, within 5 to 10 minutes, I found the metal box. I secured it, ran it out to my car, and it all was safe. But this dispute with these sisters and brothers went on for a long time. I don't have much time, I'm going to go with one more. The David probate estate. I actually probated a estate for a gentleman who died right up here on Lowell Canyon, just towards Mulholland. Single gentleman. Unfortunately, he died in his home alone. For 3 weeks, nobody knew he was dead. He didn't have close family members. We had to go in, of course, after 3 weeks. There was a lot of debris from the deterioration of his body. We had to bring in crime scene cleanup crews to clean it up, cut out part of the floor. I didn't know ServPro existed at that time. I would have called you. Again, this guy was a hoarder as well, yet he had millions of dollars accumulated. Funny thing was, is we went through the house looking for a will to see if this guy had any testamentary documents. He had none, but we found a $60,000 check that had been given to him from an insurance company for earthquake damage 5 years ago. The guy never cashed a $60,000 check. So what do we have to do now with that? We had to make a claim with the state controller's office for unclaimed property, because when you have a check like that that's not been cashed, it gets turned over to the state. It takes usually 6 months to get that, but we had to do that. We ended up auctioning off this guy's house. We were told, the house was in poor condition. We were told it was worth maybe $700,000. We sold it at auction for $1 million. I still don't understand how we did it, but we did. This was another situation where we had a guy who died without a will, multi-million-dollar estate, and his entire estate went to distant relatives who he had no relationship with and didn't barely know, because he left no will or no trust. That's one mistake people make. If you have property, you want to go to people you love, people you care about, have a will, have a trust, don't leave it to the state. I realize I'm done with my time, so I think my new buzzword, I came up with a new buzz slogan, dying will never go out of style. So, you'll always need me, you'll always need a probate trust attorney, give me a call. Steve Ajalat.